I'm Zoe Hart, and this is the story of how my parents gifted my twin sister a luxury high-rise and handed me the keys to a crumbling fire trap with a smile. That day, I learned the difference between love and obligation, but they never expected I'd turn their insult into something beautiful or what I'd do when they tried to take it back. Before I begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches. You'd think when parents hand you a set of house keys, it'd be a joyful moment. But I'll never forget the sound they made, those rusty little things clinking in my hand like leftover scrap metal, as my twin sister Chelsea held up her own sleek, engraved fob and squealed like she'd just won the lottery. She had, really. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that makes suburban backyards look like magazine spreads. Our parents, Karen and Dennis Hart, had set up a little graduation celebration. White folding chairs, finger sandwiches, lemonade sweating in mason jars. Chelsea, fresh from her communications degree, was glowing in a lemon-colored dress. She always knew how to look perfectly effortless. Me, I wore jeans. I hadn't even wanted a party. I graduated too, same day, same college. But I majored in urban studies, which, according to my dad, isn't something you hang on a wall. Clearly not something that earns you an apartment downtown. Chelsea, honey, Mom beamed, pulling a little velvet box from her purse. We're so proud of you. Chelsea opened it and gasped. It wasn't a ring, it was a key fob, sleek, black, and unmistakably upscale. No way is this the place on 7th, she shrieked, already bouncing. The one with the rooftop pool. It's yours, Dad said proudly, wrapping his arm around her shoulder. Fully paid for. We wanted you to start your life off right. She jumped into his arms. The whole backyard clapped. I even smiled reflexively. That's what I'd been trained to do, be happy for my sister. Then Mom turned to me. And Zoe, she said like she'd almost forgotten I was there. She reached into her purse again, but instead of velvet, she pulled out a set of rusted metal keys on a cracked plastic tag. These are for you, little place on the east side. You'll have to put in some elbow grease, but make it work. Make it work. That was it. No hug. No applause, just a condescending smile like I should be grateful they didn't hand me a tent. Chelsea was crying tears of joy. I was just trying not to cry at all. Why do I always get less? The question spilled from me before I could stop it. My voice cracked, slicing through the backyard buzz. A few heads turned. Dad frowned like I'd ruined the vibe. Zoe, he said, warning in his tone. Don't start. I stared at them, my parents, my twin, our smiling neighbors. No one said anything. No one asked me how I felt. They just looked away. I didn't cry until I got to the front lawn, and even then I waited until no one could see. Chelsea trailed after me, barefoot in the grass, still holding her fob like a trophy. Zoe, don't be like this, she said lightly. It's not a competition. No, I said, my voice hard. Because if it were, I'd be losing. She blinked, unbothered. Mom and Dad just know I'm more of a city girl. You like fixer-uppers, right? I almost laughed. A fixer-upper? I hadn't even seen the place. She tossed her curls and skipped back inside like it was nothing. I stood there, gripping the metal keys like they might pierce my palm. Make it work. Maybe they thought I'd be too tired to fight back. Maybe they thought I'd smile and say thank you like I always had. Maybe they thought I wouldn't do anything about it. They were wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the twin mattress in my childhood bedroom, staring up at the ceiling fan that still creaked on every rotation, just like it had in middle school when I cried after Chelsea got the bigger bedroom. Back then, I thought it was just bad luck. Now I saw it for what it was, a pattern. The peeling paint on the walls suddenly felt symbolic, faded, cracked, and quietly neglected, just like me. I picked up my phone and typed without thinking. Zoe, what did I do to deserve this? The dots popped up almost instantly. Marissa, wait, what happened? Marissa Green had been my best friend since sophomore year of college. She knew my parents, had been to every one of Chelsea's over-the-top birthday parties, and had once whispered to me at dinner, "Is it just me, or do they treat you like the family intern?" I told her everything in a voice note, because I couldn't say it out loud without crying. Minutes later, I heard the distinct sound of her knock, 3 quick raps and a dramatic pause. I barely made it downstairs before she let herself in with the key I'd given her sophomore year, the only key I'd ever been glad to give away. She brought snacks, obviously. Emergency cheese puffs and moral support, she said, kicking off her sandals. And we're going to see the house. I blinked at her. Right now? Marissa nodded like I'd asked if the sky was still up there. Yes. Because if you're gonna hate it, you should hate it with me. And if it's haunted, I need to meet the ghost. Despite myself, I laughed. We snuck out quietly, my parents already asleep, no doubt dreaming of Chelsea's pool parties and Art Deco furniture. As we pulled away in Marissa's ancient Corolla, I turned to her. What if they're right? I asked quietly. What if I am the difficult one? She didn't look at me, just reached out, rested her hand on mine. Zoe, you are not difficult. You're just the only one in that house who doesn't pretend. I didn't answer. Just let her drive. It took 20 minutes to get there, east side of town near the freeway, where the streetlights flickered and sidewalks cracked like tired skin. The address brought us to a corner lot that looked more like a forgotten shed than a home. Marissa parked. We sat in silence for a long moment. The house squatted behind a leaning chain-link fence. Vines had clawed their way up the porch columns. Windows were either broken or boarded, and the mailbox hung open like it had given up on receiving anything good. This can't be it, I whispered, but the keys in my hand said otherwise. I forced the rusted gate open. It screamed in protest. The porch groaned beneath our feet. I reached out with shaking hands, turned the key in the lock, and with a reluctant click, the door surrendered. We stepped inside. The air was heavy. Not just with dust, but something older, like smoke had lived there once and refused to leave. Marissa flipped on her phone flashlight, then reached for a switch near the door. Sparks crackled, then darkness again. What the? She tried again, and this time we heard it, a soft pop and the unmistakable sizzle of faulty wiring. Her light caught a blackened corner of the living room. The wall was charred, blistered. Near it, melted blinds clung to cracked windows. I didn't move. Couldn't. They gave me a burned house. Not a fixer-upper, not a project, a carcass. Marissa's voice broke the silence, soft, not pitying. They knew, she said. Your parents had to know. I dropped to the floor, my knees hitting bare wood that coughed up dust. Tears came then hot, humiliated. Why would they do this to me? I whispered. I've never even, Marissa knelt beside me. She didn't say anything for a moment, just let the silence sit. Then she said something I'll never forget. Maybe this isn't a grave, maybe it's a blank canvas. I looked at her, saw the fire in her eyes, the same kind I used to have. You're not what they gave you, she said, squeezing my hand. You're what you make out of it. We didn't speak for a while, just stood there in the shell of a living room, our footsteps crunching over broken glass and burnt plaster. My flashlight swept across the room, no furniture, just sagging floorboards and the pale outline of a couch that must have once sat against the wall. Only the ghost of it remained now, like the house was still trying to remember who it used to be. Smells like something tried to come back to life and gave up halfway, Marissa said softly, stepping around a half-collapsed beam. I didn't answer. I couldn't yet. The house felt bruised, not dead, but not alive either. Somewhere in between, like it had been waiting to be remembered. We moved cautiously through the first floor. Every room told the same story, fire-damaged walls, soot-streaked ceilings, warped wood. In what must have once been the kitchen, the countertop was scorched, the sink rusted over like it hadn't tasted running water in years. A single cabinet hung off one hinge, and yet beneath all the rot and ruin, there was something else, possibility. Hey, Marissa called from the back hallway. There's a bathroom here, kinda. I peeked in. The mirror was cracked. The tiles were grimy, but in one corner a patch of pale blue peeped through like a stubborn memory refusing to fade. You know, she said, brushing her fingers across the wall, this tile was expensive once. Once, I echoed, leaning in. The air smelled faintly of smoke and old lilac soap. Then something caught my eye, a narrow doorway, mostly hidden behind what used to be a linen closet. Basement, I guessed. Marissa raised an eyebrow. Either that or a murder cellar. Still, we went. The steps creaked. A few were missing entirely, and we had to descend with our backs against the wall, flashlights trembling in our hands. But at the bottom, something strange happened. It was quiet. Not just the silence of abandonment, but a thick, padded stillness. The kind you feel more than here. The basement was smaller than I expected, half-finished. The walls were a mix of brick and crumbling drywall, but in the corner, buried under soot and shards of glass, something glinted. I crossed the room and reached for it instinctively. My hand brushed something familiar. Ceramic, warm from years of memory. It was a small angel, half-melted from the fire, her wings singed, her face cracked but still somehow gentle. I recognized it immediately. "I made this," I breathed. Marissa crouched beside me. "What?" "In 3rd grade, for Mother's Day, I made 2, one for Mom, one for—" My voice trailed off. "For Chelsea." I stared at the angel, now blackened and battered. I didn't remember which one this had been, but I remembered hiding them behind my back that morning, proud, giddy, and hoping Mom wouldn't notice the wings didn't match. She did, of course she did. And she gave Chelsea the better one. The other, this one, must have ended up here somehow. Forgotten, left behind, like me. I clutched it to my chest. For the first time since the backyard betrayal, the grief gave way to something else. Not rage, not even hope, just defiance. "They gave me this house like it was an insult," I whispered. "Like it was supposed to break me." Marissa's eyes glittered in the flashlight glow. "Then let's make it a monument." I looked around at the walls peeling like old scabs, the wires that sparked like nervous twitches, the basement that smelled like ash and rot. It wasn't a home, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, it could become something no one expected. Not a gift, a resurrection. It's strange how fast despair can turn into momentum. One minute I was mourning the ashes of a life I never got to live. The next, I was standing in the middle of a disaster zone with my best friend pointing at a broken window saying, "Let's do cathedral-style drapes here. Dramatic, forgiving." That's the word that stuck with me. Forgiving. Because maybe that's what this house needed, and maybe I did too. Marissa showed up the next morning like she was on a mission from the design gods. High ponytail. Paint samples fanned in one hand, her tablet in the other. She didn't even knock, just burst through the front door of my parents' house like it was a storefront. "Rise and shine, Zoe. We've got walls to resurrect." I blinked at her from the couch, still wearing my oversized hoodie and guilt like a second skin. "You know this place might literally kill us, right?" "I already signed our names in dust on the window," she grinned. "We're married to this chaos now." And somehow, that made me smile. We returned to the house armed with essentials. Gloves, crowbars, an energy drink that tasted like battery acid, and Marissa's eternal optimism. We threw open every window, chased out a few spiders the size of emotional baggage, and began ripping away what didn't belong: molded drywall, waterlogged carpet, broken promises. By hour 3, we were coughing up soot and laughing between sneezes. "I want the kitchen to be navy," she said out of nowhere, holding up a swatch that was rich and deep and not at all what I expected. "Something about this color makes people feel like the space has depth, even if their lives don't." I raised an eyebrow. "You planning to insult my guests or inspire them? Why not both?" She was already sketching floor plans on the back of a cereal box when I started clearing debris near the front window. That's when I saw it. Half buried in a pile of burned insulation, I found a small, paint-chipped wooden block. White with the letter Z painted in faded green. I froze. My chest tightened like something had slipped behind my ribs and started squeezing. "Zoe?" Marissa looked up from her blueprints. I crouched down, brushed the grime off the edges, and turned it over in my hand. It was heavier than I remembered. "They said they lost it," I whispered. "Years ago. What is it?" I didn't answer right away. Just stared at it, this tiny remnant of a lie I didn't know had been told. "When we were kids, my dad made us name puzzles," I said finally. "One for me, one for Chelsea, same wood, same finish. I painted mine green, she painted hers pink. I loved mine, I kept it on my shelf, then one day it just vanished." "You think they threw it out?" Marissa asked gently. I think," I said slowly, "it ended up here." She came closer, eyes soft. "So, your childhood made its way to this house before you did." I ran my fingers over the letter, the grooves still visible beneath the soot. "Maybe this house isn't a punishment, maybe it's a message." Marissa didn't say anything. She didn't need to, we both knew what was happening. This house, once meant to humiliate me, was becoming something else. A mirror, a container, a battle cry. "Let's make the living room gold and bold," she said, breaking the silence. Statement wallpaper, maybe that crazy peacock mural I pinned last year. You're not the beige wall type, Zoe, you never were. That's when it happened, I laughed, really laughed. Not the kind you fake to avoid crying. Not the kind that comes out dry and hollow. This was real. Messy and snort-filled and coated in sawdust. And just like that, I saw it. Not the ruin, the potential. This house didn't hate me. It didn't judge me. It didn't hold grudges or make comparisons. It just needed hands that cared whether or not the walls stood straight and the pipes didn't groan. I could do that. I would do that. We spent the rest of the afternoon tearing up the ruined linoleum, revealing floorboards beneath that while scratched and scarred had survived the fire. Like me. Marissa danced around the dust clouds, humming an old Fleetwood Mac song while she measured corners. We ended the day exhausted, filthy, and sunburned. But we also ended it with a plan. Navy cabinets. Open shelving, gold accents, statement walls, but more importantly, a door that locked, windows that opened, and space that was mine. Marissa called it restorative rebellion. I called it coming home. There's a moment in every renovation where your muscles are screaming, your savings are drained, and your hands have more splinters than skin. But somehow, you feel invincible. That moment came for me the day we finished priming the living room. Marissa had duct-taped her earbuds to a corner lamp to turn it into a makeshift speaker. The music was loud, the fumes were strong, and we were two paint-splattered disasters dancing across plywood floors like we were on Broadway. We hadn't stopped in over a week. Every morning, I woke up sore and sorely undercaffeinated, but I couldn't wait to get to the house. Our house. That's what I'd started calling it. I'd even started wearing my dad's old flannel shirt, not out of sentiment, but because it had deep pockets and smelled like sawdust and distance. We tackled one room at a time. Marissa's design sketches were now taped up on the walls like blueprints from a parallel universe where women saved themselves and their own homes. The kitchen came first. It had been the most wrecked, fire damage, mold, a cracked sink, but we scrubbed and patched and salvaged everything we could. Marissa found a bold navy shade that made the room feel moody and expensive, even though the paint came from a clearance bin at the hardware store. We hung thrifted gold cabinet handles, each slightly different, which Marissa insisted gave it a storybook vibe. You know, I said one night as we painted cabinet doors on the porch, if this whole interior design thing doesn't work out, you could always go into motivational speaking for burnt-out twins. She snorted. Only if you're my first client. We were still laughing when we met Carl. Carl was our neighbor, a gruff, slow-moving man in his 60s with a beer belly and a voice like gravel. He showed up one afternoon while we were trying to haul an old water heater out of the basement. "Need a hand?" he asked, arms crossed. Marissa looked up from her side of the tank. "Only if you've got a crane." He didn't laugh, but he helped. And when the tank finally rolled out the back door and landed on the driveway with a satisfying thunk, he dusted his hands and said, "Got some cabinets in my garage. Solid oak. Came from my cousin's rental. You want M?" I blinked. "Seriously," he nodded. "Been sitting there for 6 years. Figured someone might actually use them someday. Looks like that might be you." That night, as we installed those cabinets, solid, stained, and slightly crooked, something inside me settled. People weren't always cruel. Sometimes they gave you what you needed without asking for anything back. And sometimes a stranger could make you feel more seen than your own family ever had. "Carl's kind of amazing," I whispered as we admired the final row. "He's like the grumpy dad you actually want," Marissa replied. We started spending our evenings sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by color swatches, scrap wood, and empty takeout containers. Marissa taught me how to patch drywall. I taught her how to silence a leaky faucet with a zip tie and hope. The soundtrack of our lives became a blend of drill whirs, Spotify playlists, and laughter echoing off half-finished walls. I found myself talking to the house when no one else was around, just narrating, telling it what I was fixing next, what I was dreaming of, thanking it for standing even after the flames. One afternoon, after sanding the hallway floor for what felt like eternity, I collapsed in the middle of the stairs and stared at the ceiling. It had water stains and a crack that looked vaguely like Florida. "I'm still mad at them," I said out loud as Marissa handed me a water bottle. Your parents, I nodded, for giving me this like it was a burden, like I'm supposed to be grateful for being the afterthought. She sat beside me, leaning her head on my shoulder. Good, she said. Stay mad. Use it. I smiled. Not because it felt good, but because she was right. I was still mad. But I was also building something out of that anger. Something sturdy. Something with navy walls and second-hand cabinets and windows that actually opened. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else to decide what I deserved. I was building it. Moving day didn't feel real until I placed my dusty record player in the living room and dropped the needle on Fleetwood Mac. Floors gleamed, scratched, yes, but honest. The walls, once blistered and blackened, now stood proud in rich, layered color. Every corner held a piece of our story, reclaimed, rewired, reimagined. There was no marble, no designer couch, but the light filtered through the gauzy curtains like the house had exhaled. I don't care what your parents say, Marissa declared, placing a succulent in the windowsill. This place is gorgeous. Magazine-worthy if the magazine was called Emotional Redemption Quarterly. I smiled, but my stomach fluttered. Because tonight they were coming. Chelsea, my parents, all of them. I told myself I was doing it to be gracious, to offer a peace offering of sorts. But really, deep down, I just wanted them to see it, to see me. To realize they'd misjudged what I was capable of. I baked. I cleaned. I even bought a bottle of overpriced wine I couldn't pronounce. The knock came right at 6. Chelsea arrived first, wrapped in some shiny thing that looked like it had a PR team. Behind her were my parents, Mom in linen, Dad in boat shoes, both scanning the porch like they'd arrived at the wrong address. Wow, Chelsea said, stepping inside. This is actually kind of amazing. There it was, not warmth, not pride, surprise. They wandered the house like tourists, fingers brushing the walls, eyes darting to the fixtures. My mother ran her hand across the navy cabinets, her mouth twitching. You painted it this dark, she asked, almost to herself. It absorbs the light, I said simply. Makes the gold hardware pop. It's bold, she replied like it was a diagnosis. Chelsea flopped onto the cream armchair I'd scored at a thrift store. This is cute, she said, clearly trying to sound generous. I mean, obviously it's still tiny but cozy. Dad opened the back door, stepping onto the tiny porch. Well, it's not a penthouse, but you've done something with it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I poured wine. Carl dropped by halfway through with a potted plant and a 6-pack of beer. He nodded at my dad, who stiffened. This your dad? I nodded. Carl, this is Dennis. Carl grunted a hello. My father responded with the smile he reserved for HOA meetings. My mother kept glancing around like she was trying to find something to compliment, but everything she saw just was not impressive, not embarrassing, just unignorable. You really live here alone? She asked. I do, I said. Moved in last week. It must be a lot to manage. Especially for someone who's not well, you were always more reflective than handy. I didn't answer. I just handed her a glass and turned up the music a little louder. After an hour of tight smiles and safe conversation, Chelsea stood and clinked her glass with a butter knife. I just want to say, she said, a little too loudly, that I love what you've done with the place. Like, it's kind of amazing you made it look like a real home. Kind of amazing. My jaw tensed. This was their way of being supportive, filtered through the lens of disbelief. But I didn't need their awe anymore. I just needed the door to close behind them. Still, when they left, my mother touched my arm gently. You've done a lot with very little, she said. It suits you. It took me a full minute after the door shut to realize that was meant to be a compliment. Marissa found me sitting on the porch, swirling the last of my wine in a chipped glass. You okay? She asked. I nodded. I think I finally understand something. What's that? They didn't come here to celebrate me. They came to confirm I hadn't fallen apart. She sank into the chair beside me. And they looked disappointed. Marissa laughed. That means you're winning. We sat in silence, the street lamp buzzing faintly above us. Inside, my record had finished. The needle hissed softly in the quiet, and in that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt something like peace, not because they were proud, but because I no longer needed them to be. The house was still warm from the night before, wine glasses in the sink, music lingering in the walls, and the faint memory of forced politeness hanging in the air when I left for work the next morning. I didn't expect them to be impressed, but I'd hoped for acknowledgement. A moment of "you built this with your bare hands." Instead, I got sideways compliments and a half-hearted plant. Still, the house was mine, and I clung to that. I came home late that evening, arms full of groceries and a head buzzing with to-do lists. But the moment I pulled up to the curb, I knew something was off. There were cars. Not just one or two, 6 of them lined haphazardly along the curb and across my gravel path. My porch lights were on, and music, low, bass-heavy, unmistakably Chelsea, was thumping through the windows. I dropped the groceries on the front step and charged inside. My cream rug, my navy kitchen, my reclaimed wood coffee table, and a dozen strangers in cocktail attire holding half-eaten slices of pizza and glasses of red wine that sloshed dangerously close to the edge. Chelsea was standing near the record player, my record player, posing for selfies with 2 girls I didn't recognize, laughing like this was just another night in her fabulous life. "What are you doing?" I said through clenched teeth. Chelsea spun around. "Zoe, hey, isn't this place great for entertaining?" She said it like I hadn't built it from soot and ash. "Did you break in?" She blinked innocently. "You never changed the spare key hiding spot. You always were a creature of habit." I stood there, stunned. My jaw tightened, my voice dropped. "You invited strangers into my home, ate my food, used my space without asking." "It's not a big deal," she said, waving her hand. "Everyone loves it here. You should be proud." I could smell the wine on her breath. "Get out," I whispered. She blinked, confused. "What?" "You don't get to do this," I said louder now, shaking. "This isn't a guest house. This isn't a crash pad. This is my home, and you don't get to treat it like your personal garbage bin just because you think it's beneath you." Someone in the kitchen went quiet. Chelsea looked around like she was just now noticing the silence. "Zoe," she said with a forced laugh, "don't be dramatic. It's just a few friends. We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" I snapped. "That your apartment is sterile and you needed something with personality. That your fallback plan is always me." Her smile faltered. I walked straight to the record player, stopped the music mid-beat, and turned back to her. "You need to leave, all of you." Chelsea blinked, visibly stunned for the first time. "But no." And then I said it. "Out!" It took 5 minutes. 5 long, awkward, dignity-dripping minutes to clear the house. One by one, the guests filed out, whispering to each other, heels clicking across my hardwood floors. No one made eye contact. Chelsea was last. She paused at the door, one hand on the knob. "You know," she said coldly, "I was trying to help. Your place looks decent, but it needed a little energy." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Chelsea," I said, leaning close, "the only energy I need less than yours is your entitlement." She scoffed and slammed the door behind her. I stood in the wreckage. My rug stained. A lipstick ring on the rim of my favorite mug. Red wine seeping into a cushion I'd driven an hour to find, and something snapped. Not the angry, firestorm kind of snap, but the quiet, steady click of a woman who has had enough. The next morning, I changed the locks. Marissa helped. She didn't ask questions, just brought coffee, a screwdriver, and that fierce look in her eyes she saved for people who hurt me. I swept the house clean, threw out every glass they touched, scrubbed the rug until my arms ached. And then I sat in the middle of the living room, my Z block in one hand, a playlist humming softly in the background. No more open doors, no more pretending. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a line in the sand. A week passed. 7 days of silence. No texts, no voicemails, not even a guilt-ridden emoji from Chelsea. I wasn't complaining. I finally had my home back, and every morning felt like a quiet triumph. Coffee brewing in the reclaimed kitchen, sunlight pouring through the clean windows. My Z block perched proudly on the entry shelf like a sentinel. For once, peace didn't feel like something I had to earn. Then she showed up. It was a Tuesday. I'd just gotten off work and was still in scrubs, keys jingling in one hand, a salad in the other, when I saw the silver Lexus idling at the curb. My mother stepped out, perfectly pressed and oddly chipper. "Zoe," she called, waving like we were at brunch. My stomach turned. She stood at the edge of my porch, arms folded across her cream sweater set like she wasn't sure if she was visiting or inspecting. I didn't invite her in. I was in the neighborhood, she said, the kind of lie she told so often it didn't even tremble. Thought I'd check in. It's been tense, hasn't it? I said nothing, just waited. Her smile twitched. I wanted to talk to you about the house. My pulse kicked up. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. I didn't take it. She placed it gently on the porch rail. Chelsea, she began, and I flinched, has run into a bit of trouble. Of course she had. She made some unfortunate financial decisions, my mother continued. Maxed out a few cards, nothing unfixable, but she had to sell the apartment. That left her temporarily displaced. Temporarily displaced. My blood ran cold. She needs a place, she said, her tone almost maternal now. And after everything we thought, well, since this house legally still belongs to us, it makes sense for her to stay here until things stabilize. I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard correctly. This house, I repeated, that you gave me. Her smile was tighter now. We gave you the keys, Zoe, not the deed. I blinked. Are you serious? It was always under our name. You never asked about the paperwork. We assumed you understood. My mouth went dry. I had rebuilt this place from rubble, scrubbed, painted, bled for it. And now they were pulling a technicality like a magician's reveal. I laughed. It was bitter and sharp and nothing like joy. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You handed Chelsea a fully paid high-rise apartment with a deed and contract and insurance. You handed me the charred remains of a fire hazard, and now that I've made it beautiful, you're taking it back. She blinked. Zoe, don't be dramatic. You made it livable, but it was never yours. The envelope sat between us like a threat dressed as paperwork. Chelsea will only be here temporarily, she added. We thought you might stay with Marissa, or I stepped forward then, close enough for her to flinch. No, I said, my voice was ice. You don't get to think for me anymore. Her face faltered for the first time. I gave everything to this place, not just money, time, pride, my dignity. And now you want to rip it out from under me so she can have another free ride. She softened her tone. Zoe, this is what family does. We take care of each other. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, you've never taken care of me. You've managed me, like a disappointment you couldn't quite hide. She opened her mouth, but I turned away. The screen door groaned behind me as I walked back inside. I didn't slam it. I wanted her to feel the stillness I left behind. She stood on the porch for another minute. Then the Lexus purred away. I sat in the middle of my living room, staring at the walls I painted with my own hands. And for the first time in this whole journey, I felt something worse than anger. I felt powerless, because the papers were real. The house wasn't mine. All of it, every shelf, every fixture, every patch of repaired wiring was built on someone else's land, and they were reclaiming it. I didn't turn on the lights when I got home that night. The house, my house, still mine in spirit if not on paper, sat dim and quiet like it understood what had happened. I stood in the entryway, frozen, staring at the shadows curling along the walls I'd painted. It was like the whole place was holding its breath with me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat, cross-legged on the floor, back against the navy cabinets I once thought were bold and triumphant. Now they felt like a joke. An elaborate performance staged on a property that was never mine to begin with. By the time Marissa arrived, I hadn't moved in over an hour. She walked in without knocking, like always, arms full of takeout and fury. I brought noodles and the playlist we made the night we tore down the mouse wall. I didn't respond. She sat beside me anyway. We ate in silence. The record player crackled softly in the background, and somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped and fell silent. The world kept spinning, which felt offensive, honestly. Finally, I said it. They're taking it back. Marissa didn't flinch. They're giving it to her, I added, voice cracking. After everything, after I turned it into something real. Still, she said nothing. I scrubbed burn marks off these floors with my own hands, I whispered. And they're just ripping it out from under me like it was on loan. Marissa took a slow sip from her drink, then set it down. They don't deserve it, she said softly. That's the thing, I muttered. It doesn't matter who deserves what, they can, so they will. Maybe, she said, but if they want it that bad. She turned toward me then, eyes glinting in a way I hadn't seen since our dorm room debates about feminist horror films. We give it to them, I frowned. What? "We give it back," she said, "but not the way they expect." There was a pause. I watched her face, waiting for the punchline, the joke, the silver lining. Instead, she leaned closer. "You built this place," she said slowly, like she was explaining gravity. "Every inch, every color, every light bulb, it's yours in every way that matters." "Except legally," I said flatly. "Exactly. So if they want to repossess the house, fine, let them. Let Chelsea walk in smug and victorious. Let your mom spin it like an act of family responsibility. But when they take it," her voice dropped to a whisper, "we make sure it reminds them of you every single day." I turned to look at her fully now. She smiled, wolfish. "No damage, nothing criminal, just a little. Chaos, creative undoing." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Controlled dismantling," she said, like it was a phrase normal people used. "We take everything that's not nailed down, we store it at Carl's, furniture, fixtures, decor gone." "Okay." "And then we loosen a few wires. You know the hallway outlets have always been finicky. We remove surge protectors, leave things vulnerable." Stared at her. "You want to sabotage it." "I want to return it," she said, "in the condition it was given, and then some." Silence, and then I laughed. It started as a nervous chuckle, the kind that bubbles up when you're not sure if your friend is brilliant or unhinged. But the more I thought about it, the gall of what she was suggesting, the poetry of it, the more it turned into something real. I laughed until my sides hurt. "You're insane," I said, wiping my eyes. "You love it," she replied. I nodded. I did. Suddenly I wasn't powerless anymore. I had a say in how this ended. If they wanted to bulldoze my dignity, they'd have to crawl through the mess they made to get to it. "Carl's in," she added. "He already cleared space in his garage." Of course he did. We stayed up late that night, eating noodles and planning quietly chaotic justice. We made lists, gathered tools, highlighted weak spots in the house we knew better than anyone else ever would. And when I finally went to bed on a mattress I now knew I'd have to move, I didn't cry. I dreamed of firelight and Chelsea's face when it touched her walls. The house was hollow again. Not like before when it was just ash and memory, but deliberately so. Everything was gone. The peacock mural, peeled, the reclaimed gold hardware, unscrewed and bagged, the navy kitchen cabinets, emptied and removed from their hinges with surgical precision. We even took the light bulbs. Carl let us store it all in his garage, everything cleanly stacked, labeled, and covered with tarps like we were archiving a revolution. "I've never seen two women dismantle a house so fast in my life," he muttered as we wheeled out the record player. I smiled. "It's not sabotage, it's subtraction." By the time we were done, the house looked like a model that had been lived in, loved, and then abruptly abandoned. Like someone had started a dream and then walked out mid-sentence. That was the point. We didn't want it to scream damage, we wanted it to whisper betrayal. And then came the wires. Marissa handled those. She wasn't an electrician, but she knew enough to loosen the right circuits, expose the vulnerable seams. Nothing overt. Just a few removed grounding screws, a couple of overloaded plugs left behind, a surge protector mysteriously missing. A slow burn trap. The kind of thing that wouldn't raise alarms until it did. I cleaned the floors one last time, out of habit more than necessity. Then I stood in the living room and looked around. Everything was gone, but somehow the house felt heavier, like it knew what was coming. "I should feel worse," I said quietly. Marissa didn't look up. She was coiling up an extension cord. "You don't owe this place anything. You gave it life. They gave it paperwork." I nodded, clutching the ceramic angel I'd found in the basement. I'd almost left it, but some things weren't part of the performance. Some things were mine. We locked the door behind us. 2 days later, Chelsea moved in. Of course, she didn't call me to tell me. I found out through Carl, who watched her arrive in a white SUV filled with boxes, designer bags, and a portable bar cart. "She was smiling like a kid at Christmas," he said, sipping from his thermos. "Didn't even notice the bare walls." "She will," I muttered. I waited across the street that evening. Sat on Carl's porch, hood up, sipping ginger tea while the sun dipped behind the rusted fence line. Chelsea strutted through the front door with a Bluetooth speaker blasting something smug and expensive. She didn't notice the flicker when she turned on the lights. Didn't question the way the air conditioner groaned like it was choking on its own breath. She just plugged in everything at once. Ring light, wine fridge, hair straightener, music, charger, and then pop. The breaker didn't trip, not right away. Instead, the lights dimmed to a surreal hum. Then sparks hissed from the kitchen outlet like it was exhaling its last breath. I leaned forward in my seat. Marissa, beside me, whispered, 3, 2, crack. A sharp bang from the back of the house. Then silence. Then flames. They licked the edge of the kitchen wall with almost artistic grace, curling like dancers toward the ceiling. Smoke followed, fast and angry. And Chelsea's scream ripped through the air like the final violin stroke in a horror film. By the time the fire trucks wailed down the block, she was outside, barefoot, crying, mascara streaming down her cheeks. She pointed frantically at the house, blaming faulty wiring, screaming for someone to listen. But I didn't move. Neither did Carl or Marissa, or the neighbors who had come out onto their porches, arms crossed, watching the golden child lose her second gift. I stood then, just once, just long enough for Chelsea to see me. Our eyes met across the chaos. She opened her mouth, but I turned away before she could say anything. No need. Let her sit in the smoke and wonder. Let her remember the warmth she didn't build. Let her feel the heat of something she thought she owned but never respected. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel. Sometimes it comes with silence. And fire. Fire trucks screamed down the block, red lights bouncing across dark windows and old brick. I watched from across the street, arms wrapped tight around myself, feeling the cold seep through my jacket and deep into my bones. For the first time since childhood, my parents arrived too late. I could see them even before they reached the curb, my mother clutching her purse to her chest, my father's stride stiff and panicked, scanning for Chelsea. They found her on the grass, knees scraped, face streaked with mascara and ash. She was wailing, gesturing wildly at the house as if volume might change the truth. The wiring, it just blew up. I didn't do anything. Chelsea sobbed, grabbing our mother's hand with both of hers. My mother stroked her hair, shushing her, eyes wild as she looked at the flames chewing through the roof, the home she never really valued until it was too late. My father stalked toward the nearest firefighter, demanding answers, waving his hands at the black smoke rising above the street. But no one looked at me, not at first. Carl stood beside me, hands shoved deep in his pockets, gaze fixed on the blaze. "You okay, kid?" he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. I nodded, voice caught in my throat. The neighbors came out one by one, drawn by the spectacle but staying for the lesson. They whispered among themselves, watching Chelsea's theatrics and my parents' frantic blame game. Nobody seemed surprised that the house was gone. Some of them even looked satisfied. For years, I'd felt invisible on this block. Just the quiet heart girl who never made waves. Tonight, the air was thick with a new kind of respect, silent but unmistakable. The fire chief approached, clipboard in hand, jaw set. He spoke to my parents in that careful, measured tone professionals use when they're about to deliver bad news. "We found evidence of electrical overload," he said. "This wasn't up to code. Insurance might have a problem with the claim." My mother paled. My father stuttered something about upgrades and contractors. I almost laughed. Chelsea started to sob harder, wailing, "I lost everything, my clothes, my computer, my whole life." I didn't move, didn't speak. I felt nothing for her tears, not anymore. When my mother finally looked my way, it was with something approaching horror, as if on some level she understood exactly what had happened. But she'd never say it. She'd never let herself say it. She crossed the street, coming to stand just a few feet away. "Zoe," she began, voice trembling, "what will we do now? That house, we depended on it." I met her eyes, calm, cold, for once not seeking approval. "I depended on you," I said, "but you were never there." She flinched, like my words stung worse than the smoke. "I hope Chelsea's okay," I added, voice soft but steady. "But you should know I won't be cleaning up this mess." Her mouth opened, then closed. There was nothing left to say. Marissa joined me then, sliding her arm through mine. "You did what you had to do," she whispered. "I know," I said. Across the street, Chelsea screamed at the firemen, trying to blame the house, the wiring, fate itself. But the truth was written in every neighbor's eyes. Entitlement had finally burned itself out. The sun began to rise behind us, lighting up the charred skeleton of what once was. I inhaled deeply, letting the cold air fill my lungs. The house was gone. But for the first time, I didn't feel empty. I felt free. The morning after the fire, The neighborhood smelled like wet ash and scorched wood. I stood at the edge of what used to be my porch, boots sinking into the soggy remains of a life I had built with my bare hands. The frame was still smoldering, beams blackened and bent like ribs around an empty chest. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to mourn. The house had been stolen from me long before it burned. Marissa walked beside me, silent, her hands jammed into her jacket pockets. She didn't try to hug me or say something optimistic. She just stayed. That was enough. Carl showed up with a thermos of coffee and a truck bed already packed with boxes, our boxes. My chairs, my dishes. My plants stacked gently in plastic crates. Even the navy cabinet doors, neatly wrapped in blankets. Everything we'd removed before Chelsea moved in. "Got it all out," he said simply. "Didn't want the flames to take what you built." I blinked, staring at the truck. You saved it." "Saved what mattered," he replied, shrugging. "The rest was just drywall." My throat tightened. "Thank you." He nodded once and walked back to his porch, leaving me with the smell of burned dreams and the quiet hum of survival. By noon, the insurance adjuster had arrived, a tall man with a clipboard snapping photos of the wreckage, his face unreadable. My parents hovered nearby, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. My mother's hair was pulled back in a messy bun, my father's shirt untucked. Chelsea stood off to the side, arms crossed, mascara smeared, a scowl replacing last night's sobs. The adjuster took a long breath, flipped through his notes, and said, "We've reviewed the initial report. This was not an act of God or a structural fault. This was negligence. Overloaded circuits, unsafe use of appliances. Insurance cannot cover this loss." My mother gasped. My father started to argue, rattling off words like liability and good faith and family policy. The adjuster stayed firm. "No payout," he repeated. "I'm sorry." Chelsea turned on me then, eyes wild. "This is your fault. You gave me a death trap." I tilted my head. "I gave you a home. You killed it." She lunged forward like she might slap me, but my father held her back. My mother's voice cracked. "Zoe, please, we've lost everything." I almost laughed. "We." "You didn't lose everything," I said quietly. "You lost a free ride." Then I turned and walked away. For the next few weeks, my life shrank to the essentials: work, sleep, sorting the boxes Carl had saved, selling off what I could: extra chairs, rugs, lamps, enough to cover rent on a small apartment on the north side of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No strings, no fine print. I got my old job back, moved my plants into sunny windows, unpacked my record player and played Fleetwood Mac again, but this time the song sounded different. Lighter, like a sigh instead of a plea. Marissa came over on weekends, bringing snacks and paint swatches. She talked about starting her own design firm. I started writing blog posts about what we'd done, tips on salvaging, DIY rehab, making something out of nothing. People began sharing them. Comments trickled in from women who'd been handed gifts that were really burdens. "You're not alone," I typed one night, staring at the glow of my laptop screen. "And you're not broken." I hit publish. And for the first time, my words felt like a home. One evening, Carl stopped by my new place to return a box I'd forgotten. "Still standing," he said, nodding at the apartment. "Still standing," I echoed. He hesitated, then said, "Sometimes a fire's the only way to clear a field." I smiled faintly. "I know." When he left, I sat by the window, cradling the ceramic angel I'd saved from the old basement. Its wings were still cracked, its face still half melted. But it was mine. Like me, cracked, half-burned, still standing. 1 year later, I live in a different kind of quiet, not the silence of being overlooked, not the awkward hush that used to follow every comparison to Chelsea. This quiet is earned. It fills my mornings like sunlight. Gentle, unrushed, entirely mine. I live in a tiny walk-up on the 3rd floor of an old brick building with cracked tile and neighbors who say good morning. My windows face east, and when the sun hits them just right, my plants stretch like they're greeting an old friend. There's a new record player in the corner, second-hand, of course, and a low table I built myself from the salvaged navy cabinet doors. Every time I set down my coffee, I remember where it came from, what it survived, what I survived. Chelsea. I haven't spoken to her. Last I heard, she moved back in with our parents while trying to relaunch her brand. I scroll past her curated selfies sometimes, cropped sunsets, overpriced lattes, captions about bouncing back. She still doesn't know how to apologize. Still doesn't understand that what burned wasn't just wood and wire. It was trust. My parents, we talk. Briefly, on holidays, birthdays. They send cards now, always late, always signed, with love, Mom and Dad, as if the right signature could rewrite history. I don't correct them. I've learned some things can't be fixed. Some relationships don't need rebuilding. They just need boundaries. The real surprise has been what came after the fire. Marissa and I launched a blog together, Reclaim the Room, half renovation diary, half manifesto. We post tutorials, share photos of salvaged spaces, and spotlight stories from women who took back control of their homes, their narratives, their dignity. It's taken off in ways I never expected. People write in every day, not just about walls and paint, but about starting over. One woman turned her late grandmother's shed into a writing studio. Another left an abusive marriage and used our blog to design her first solo apartment. They all ask the same question in different words. Is it too late for me? And I get to answer from a place of truth. No, it's never too late to rebuild. Marissa laughs at me sometimes when I go into full blog voice mode, but she also tears up when she reads the comments. She says we lit a match in the right kind of way. Last week, we started hosting local workshops. Small ones, 6 women, a chipped coffee table, 3 kinds of sandpaper. But by the end of each session, there's paint in someone's hair and a glow that can't be bought in a store. It's healing. Not loud, not flashy, but real. This morning, I sat on my fire escape with a chipped mug and a journal, watching the city wake up. It smelled like toast and fall air. A train rumbled in the distance. Across the street, someone was playing piano out their window. Marissa called out from the kitchen, "You want pancakes or chaos today?" I smiled. "Both, in that order." She laughed. The sound danced through the apartment like wind chimes. Before heading back inside, I glanced at the ceramic angel sitting on the window ledge. Its wings were still cracked, one eye faintly scorched. It looked ridiculous, and it looked perfect, because I'm not trying to be flawless anymore. I'm trying to be whole. And wholeness, that's messy, scratched, stubborn, stitched together with kindness and boundaries and late-night paint fumes. But it's mine. Every inch of this life, I built it. Not because I was handed something shiny, but because I was given ashes. And somehow I made a home. So when people ask about the fire, the rumors, the whispered stories, I just shrug. Sometimes the only way to rebuild is to burn down what never belonged to you.